it's proven, are those impeachable offenses?
Well, they would be impeachable offenses. Whether they are important enough to justify an impeachment is a different question, but certainly they'd be impeachable offenses because even though they were committed before the president became president, they were committed in the service of fraudulently obtaining the office. That would be that would be an impeachable offense. But the fact of the matter is that what we see from these indictments and charging statements is a much broader conspiracy against the American people.
You were just listening to the incoming chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, sounding the alarm about the latest court filings from federal prosecutors regarding Michael Cohen's payments to two women during the 2016 campaign. Nadler says it would be an impeachable offense if it's proven Trump directed the illegal payments. Let's bring in our panel. Back with me are Jennifer Rubin and Michelle Bernard. And joining the table is E.J. Dionne, Washington Post columnist and co-author of One Nation After Trump. Thank you all very much for being here. Given what Congressman Nadler just said, let's take a listen to what Senator Angus King of Maine just said on Meet the Press.
I don't think that there's evidence yet available to the public where there would be more or less a consensus that this was an appropriate path. My concern is that if impeachment is moved forward on the evidence that we have now, at least a third of the country would think it was just political revenge and a coup against the president. That wouldn't serve us well at all. The best way to solve a problem like this, to me, is elections.
E.J., I'm going to start with you. Doesn't the senator make a point there?
Well, I agree with him, actually. I think we have to be thinking of the long term here. And the long-term outcome we want is a decisive defeat for Trumpism, where a majority of Americans say this is a terrible mistake, so we can set a new course for the country. Now, there may come a point in this process where the evidence is so overwhelming that there really is a kind of moral obligation to impeach. I get that, I understand that, and I accept that. But I think rushing to impeachment is unnecessary, and it's not a good idea. This should be done very carefully, and a majority of Americans really have to be in on this. Otherwise, I think we're better off just to see Trump defeated by the voters.
Right, and we have to remember, everyone, that impeachment is not a legal process. It is a political process, which has a whole different set of rules here. You know, that being said, there are some people on Capitol Hill who are willfully ignoring the evidence as presented in the documents just released on Friday about what in the world is going on. Let's take a listen to Senator Rand Paul and what he had to say on Meet the Press.
I guess I don't quite understand it because I don't know what's illegal about trying to build a hotel in Russia. So this is pretty common, and I see no problem with someone running for president trying to build a hotel somewhere. Now, if you were asking and saying, I will give you something in exchange for letting us build a hotel, that would be wrong. But I haven't heard any evidence of that. Just trying to build a hotel somewhere, I can't imagine how that would be criminal. Or why you'd lie about it if it's not criminal.
Jennifer?
I think there was a $50 million penthouse, if I remember it correctly, that was going to be offered to Vladimir Putin. You know, I think this is shameful. The president has been implicated in a crime. If Rand Paul wants to say Republicans are no longer in favor of holding the president to the same standard of law we hold ordinary citizens, that is his right. But I think this kind of willful ignorance, I'm not really seeing what's going on kind of nonsense, really is beneath someone who is in the United States Senate. I will say this, however, I think Democrats are going to be presented with a really hard decision. There's going to be a lot of evidence of impeachable offenses in a variety of contexts. And what do they do then? You do have a moral obligation, a constitutional obligation to proceed. But on the other hand, I agree entirely with E.J. that it would be politically unwise. You wouldn't be able to remove him, and it would infuriate a good chunk of the American people. So what do you do if you really are caught in that position where there's overwhelming evidence of wrongdoing, of criminal wrongdoing? Democrats are going to have to wrestle with that and wrestle with it very seriously. It's noteworthy, I think, that Jerry Nadler, who has never been one to be rushing towards impeachment, is acknowledging that based upon what we've seen, if proven, we already have evidence of an impeachable offense.
You know, one of those triggers we've talked a lot about is the possibility of a pardon. And it's been out there that the president could pardon Paul Manafort, could pardon Roger Stone, could pardon James Corsi, although he's the one who seems to be waiting for a pardon. But here's what Senator Marco Rubio had to say on CNN about the potential of a pardon for Paul Manafort.
It would be a mistake, and I would strongly counsel against it. I don't think that, in my view, the presidential pardon power was not created for these sorts of purposes. I just think it would be the wrong thing to do, and I think it would be a huge political mistake as well.
Michelle?
Well, you know, at least one voice of sanity coming from the Republican Party this morning. He's absolutely correct. If the president were to pardon Manafort, it's only going to lead to more questions that always start with why? I mean, never in the political history of the United States and presidential elections have we heard so much about Russia, and so many people lying, overtly lying repeatedly, and to pardon Manafort at this time would only seem to point to more evidence that a crime was committed, that the president is trying to use the pardon power to sort of eradicate any sense of guilt on his part. It's a wrong political move, and if he does it, quite frankly, if the House Democrats were to move to impeach the president, I really don't see how the Republicans in the Senate could avoid removing him from office.
And then one of the things that keeps coming up is there's this Department of Justice rule or guidance that says you can't indict a sitting president. So then that leads to the question of, well, what happens if he's no longer president, either voted out of office in 2020 or 2024? What could happen then? Congressman Adam Schiff was on Face the Nation today, and here's what he said on the possibility of DOJ indicting the president when he leaves office.
There's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time. We have been discussing the issue of pardons that the president may offer to people or dangle in front of people. The bigger pardon question may come down the road as the next president has to determine whether to pardon Donald Trump.
I mean, EJ, that is an incredible statement.
Yeah.
Right. Well, first of all, I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump pardoned himself, which he probably can do, and try to get rid of the whole thing. I don't think the DOJ ruling on this has been fully litigated. Lawyers here can help me on that. So I'm not sure that's true, but let's assume that that holds. I think that does two things. One, it does increase pressure on House Democrats to impeach, because the argument is, well, is he going to be above the law? I still think they should resist rushing to that conclusion. But secondly, yeah, the next president will face that choice. I have a feeling, especially if that next president is a Democrat, he or she will be in no rush to pardon Donald Trump after he leaves office.
Jennifer,
Can I add something,
yeah,
Jonathan?
Michelle, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to add, just the lawyer in me couldn't let it go. Donald Trump might be able to pardon himself for federal crimes, but there is a New York State Attorney General looking into all of these allegations. He cannot he can't pardon himself for a state offense. And the other thing I wanted to add, we know that Congress is filled with many, many lawyers, right? Every lawyer has an obligation to act. If we see that an overt crime has been committed, I don't see how any member who is a member of a state bar that is a lawyer in the United States of America could ignore evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors and not vote for impeachment of Donald Trump.
Jennifer, I mean, we've been watching for the last 2 years Congress filled with lawyers do nothing.
Yeah. Well, Republican Congress, members of Congress, I would say.
Well, yes.
EJ is exactly right. That is a guidance. It's never been litigated. I don't know that the Trump Justice Department is going to test it. I also don't think that Trump can pardon himself. And if he tries that, and that's his only mechanism, he risks being prosecuted after he leaves office. For that very reason, I would predict here on MSNBC that when Trump leaves office, he will resign the presidency 10 minutes before Mike Pence leaves office, allowing Pence to pardon him if there is not a Republican president to follow him.
Wow,
So,
we got Jennifer, we got that on tape. And also, when you accept a pardon, you have to accept a level of guilt.
Yes.
So
yes.
let's keep that in mind. My panel will be right back. Up next, Who Won the Week?